Welcome to another episode of the Game Plan Podcast, where we delve into the intersection of sport economics and human spirit. Today with us, we've got a truly inspiring guest. Welcome to yet another episode of the Game Plan Podcast. Remember something, endurance is the most difficult discipline, and the one who endures final victory is that person. Today, I have an extremely special guest and very inspiring personality, Toby Gregory, someone who is the founder of the Arabian Ocean Rowing Team and also has got a few records on his name. And we're going to be talking a lot about that and his stories and what has motivated him and his team to achieve such feats, to go on these adventures. I'm very, very curious to know why, firstly, and I will be asking you a lot of why questions, Toby, but welcome to the show and thank you so much for making time for us.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's an amazing facility and really excited to be here.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Toby, of course, we know that you've embarked on this 5,000 kilometer unsupported row across the Atlantic Ocean. And of course, you've done one across the Arctic Ocean as well. Can you tell me how your journey started? Where did it all come from? What were some of the early stages?
Yeah, I think as with anything, there's a multitude of things that come together. Some you're aware of, some are present and around you, but you're not quite sure that they're contributing factors. I think there were kind of two really decisive moments. I read a book years ago called The Pennant's Way, and that talked about a row, two individuals many years ago who had a similar idea, a bit like me. They had no experience of it, and it was just a fascinating story. You know, it's a really interesting book, and that for me kind of was the beginning and end of it. I wasn't a rower. I had a full-time job working for the leadership of the UAE. That was all consuming. If I wasn't doing that, I was also doing radio and other elements. So I didn't have any time to consider anything else. But I had some interactions with the UN Environment Programme, also locally through preparations for COP and other elements. And gradually, I became aware of the challenges facing our oceans and also how important our oceans are. They produce 50% of the oxygen we breathe. It's the largest carbon sink. I can give you a whole range of stats. I won't bore you with those now, but I think it was a combination of that and something else, and just this perfect storm that generated, and that I kind of became transfixed on the idea to be the difference that people want to see in the world. You know, everyone has these hopes, these dreams, but what do you do about it? You know, we kind of get to the weekend, another week is done. We're all like, great, I can relax. It's a weekend. Well, you can't. You know, your life doesn't stop. You just have to achieve. And so as a consequence, I kind of put a line in the sand and decided I was going to do something about it.
I want to go back to where you mentioned how important oceans are. Of course, a lot of us don't know about this, and I'm going to deep dive a little bit into that part. What is the importance of an ocean to our planet, to our ecosystem?
I think it depends on who you ask and where they're from. From a personal perspective, if I'm just kind of quoting top level facts and information, it gives us our oxygen. You know, every second breath we take, that can't be more critical. You know, if I was speaking to somebody on a small island developing state in the Pacific towards Fiji, you know, the ocean to them is their livelihood. It's the seas are rising. So actually the ocean has an importance to every single person on the planet. More importantly, in parts of the world, it starts to regulate your climate. It has a huge impact on the type of weather we experience. And so actually when the seas are heating up, that causes additional issues. Not just that, helps with cooling. There's a whole range of things that the ocean helps with. And just from a fundamental perspective, you know, with our 21st century lives, it's a mode of transport. Yeah, the amount of stuff we consume, these microphones, everything I'm wearing has probably come here by ocean. So actually, it serves a purpose to everybody on this planet. Just don't look at it closely enough.
Is it true they say, or research has also said that medical science is doing a lot of research and discovery into understanding deeper levels of life underwater and protecting our water bodies much more harder, because there is a lot of cure to a lot of diseases that could be found from life which is available underwater?
So I'm definitely not a medic, and my medical skills leave a lot to be desired, as anyone on my rowing teams could tell you. But certainly the interesting thing about the ocean is like we've fully explored maybe 15 to 20% of it, which sounds crazy because we're on the same planet.
Yeah.
You know, we're looking at going to Mars, we're talking about the moon, yet we don't even know what's next door to us. How can we not know? You know, recently they found a new species in the ocean. Well, how can you now, this far along with submarines, with science, with research, only just to be discovering things when it's right here, when it's right next to us? I think the ocean comes with a lot of benefits for a lot of people, you know, namely mostly peace. You know, when particularly for myself, when you're that far out in the ocean, there's no light pollution, there's no nothing. And actually the peace you feel, the way you feel grounded with the planet is amazing. You don't necessarily go into it for that, but it's a byproduct, it's an experience. You know, I'll never forget the stars at night. Like literally you could reach up and touch them. But also just having no buildings, nothing but the planet around you is quite a special and unique feeling.
I think it's also got to do with the stillness around you, isn't it? Everything just comes to a stop. You feel that the clock's not ticking anymore. It's quiet, especially I think on beautiful nights when the water is absolutely still.
Yeah, I'd love to say I experienced that element of it. When I was on an ocean rowing boat, either in the Arctic or rowing across the whole of the Atlantic, the ocean was anything but still. You know, we had one night where it was quiet. And actually on that one night, I'm quite sure I saw a shark fin coming towards us. It posed no danger, but just in your mind, you're so fatigued. It's just like, not now. But yeah, the ocean is always talking. It's always making a noise. It's very active. It's not necessarily a still body. There's so much going on there. It's teeming with marine life. And it's just a really exciting thing. There's no half an hour that's the same. You know, you've got suddenly calm waters, then it's stormy. We faced huge storms on our crossing. In fact, both across the Arctic and the Atlantic, we faced massive storms. And then you've got the currents. You know, I remember one time when two occasions in the Arctic where one person was rowing and the current against us was so strong, we couldn't actually move. We were going backwards. So another person went out. In fact, in the end, I think we had about 3 of us rowing for about 4 or 3 hours, going nowhere just to maintain position because the current, the movement of the ocean was so strong. And at another point, it actually just transported us so fast that the boat turned around. We were starting to go along what seemed like a river, although we were in the middle of the ocean, just streaming along backwards, using these 3-meter oars just to stay upright because it was throwing us everywhere. So it's not necessarily a calm or still journey, but it's definitely a spiritual and eventful one.
Was there a point of time, especially on the Atlantic? I've seen some videos where the seas can get extremely rough. How do you sustain your boat? While you said, you know, we had to just be in the same position, at least to know where you are. Of course, there's support in terms of GPS and technology is done really well. But in extreme rough seas, how do you survive?
Good question. I think just with anything in life, it's about moving forward. You know, there's no difference between being on the ocean or facing a pressurized, highly pressurized situation off of it. You just have to keep going. You know, that moment we fight or flight and we freeze, that's when it all becomes too much. It's when it overwhelms us, it consumes us, our brains start to eat into ourselves and our thoughts and our feelings, and we become anxious, we become worried. And of course, you know, in one of the storms we faced that lasted for about 6 days, it was particularly perilous. You know, definitely there are moments where you're just thinking, how are we going to get through this? But you do. And it's the same with life. You just have to keep moving forward. You just have to do small things. And that always starts with either a step or some sort of movement, an action towards solving the problem. And the only thing we could possibly do was hope that through surviving through a period of time, the storm would abate and go away, or we'd move forward so we could move out of that weather system. Now, we have no engine, we have no motor, we have no sail. The only thing we've got to do to help us move is to use oars. And when it was incredibly rough, we couldn't have 2 of us rowing, we could only have 1 of us rowing.
Right.
In fact, it's so rough that actually one of those people, when you're rowing, you're quite often thrown out your rowing seat. So it's very difficult. You just have to keep going and simplify things. Don't overcomplicate it. Don't think you're getting to the end. You know, you don't think, okay, will we still finish? We just don't know. But what you do know is a small positive step you can do to help you at that time. You repeat a small positive step 50 times, well, you're 50 paces further. And it's exactly the same on land as it is in the sea with any issue, any challenge, no matter what it is. You just have to find a way to keep moving. If you overthink it, that problem's going to become magnified. If the problem becomes magnified, it starts to consume you. And you just can't let that happen. Now, I can't say that we sat there and we didn't panic, didn't worry. Of course we did. It's human nature to worry and your brain's designed to protect yourself. But the actual outcome that you want is one where you've done something positive. You acknowledge what you can control and what you can't control. You make sure those around you are okay as much as you can. And you progress. And that's all you do. And you press repeat 1,000 times.
Why do I have a feeling that this episode's going to be one emotional one?
Well, hopefully not. I'm not built for that.
Well, I do. I'm gonna ask you because we're talking about discoveries and learning so much about life from all your experiences. I'm going to ask you a very funny question.
Okay.
There's been a lot of chatter around the deepest point on Earth.
Yes.
Being an airspace and not really having like a hard bottom.
Okay.
Do you have anything to say to that?
Again, I'm not a scientist. I think depth is a perception because actually from a visual perspective, you can't see it, right?
True.
So you rely on other instruments to give you the information to tell you it's that deep. I was aware that while we were possibly in the deepest parts of our crossing, if I dropped this kind of Middlesex University Cup over the edge, it would have probably taken 2 hours to reach the bottom. I'm guessing this is what we were told. Even if it's an hour, right? That's a long time.
Yeah.
That's quite deep.
Yeah.
So actually from a depth perspective, you also have to think, apart from being fascinating and definitely interesting, it was one we were very frequently curious about. For us, from a panic perspective, a worry perspective, what difference does it make? We have to kind of put those things aside. I can't see the bottom when it's 10 meters deep or when it's 5 miles deep. So actually from a mental perspective, you kind of shut some of those elements out. Now, obviously we had to go into the water to clean the bottom of the boat about every 4 days, every 5 days. You have to be harnessed on so the ocean doesn't drag you away. But there were 2 things that were rather special. Number one, looking down and just like knowing that goes on and on and on. And just thinking, what's beneath me? What's around me? And then I think the other thing that's quite interesting is that has anyone else in the world ever swam in this part of the water where I'm in? No, I'll never know the truth on that. Privately, I like to think perhaps they haven't. It may be an interesting shout to say they haven't because it's a small drop in a large ocean.
Of course.
But how incredible in this day and age you can have such kind of unique experiences. But what I don't miss from all of that is certainly the person being on shark watch and every 2 minutes having to look around to make sure nothing was about to bite you.
Yeah, I'm sure because it's not a very large boat. And
unfortunately, the boat's on the small side. It's roughly, it's a bit bigger than a car in terms of length. In terms of width, it's narrower than a car. So actually boat's probably about that wide. And there you are, 5,000 kilometers ahead to cross. Maybe 4 or 5 miles beneath you, no help in sight. Not even if we radioed it. It depends on where the other boat is. Is it 500 miles away? Is it like an hour away? You can't think about those things. You just have to try and enjoy the moment.
Sure. I'm very curious to ask you this, so I am going to go ahead and put this across. When you were maybe 5 or 6 years old, do you think that rowing was something that you would have picked up?
No, of course not. I like it. Not even when I was 18. Look, I've always been a sports fanatic in some capacity. I prefer to participate than just to watch. I particularly like team sports. I think if you have the right team operating the right way, you can beat anyone and they can achieve anything. There's always a structure or a process that can be put in place to develop a team that can resist any pressure and develop and, succeed in an outcome that you wish for from whatever it is you're doing. But yeah, just like anyone else, I've never known what it is I really want to do. And I have one strong idea and then it flitters onto something else. Now, at some point in your life, you have to kind of settle down and say, I'm going to give this a go. And I think the one thing that everyone has to do is deliver for themselves a commitment to try. And that's quite often the hardest bit because what if you fail, right? Yeah. Especially with us in the ocean, we had no rowing experience. We had no ocean going experience. So why would anyone want to back us? Especially in today's social media world, why would anyone want to do anything other than laugh? And I think there were many people that as soon as we set off, thought we'd be back in 24 hours. And certainly we felt like that after 24 hours, but we kept going. But yeah, I think for anyone of any age, that thing about when you're younger, what do you want to be? And even now, what do you want to be? It's a huge question. And I think nobody truly knows the answer. What I think people might know is the things they like. And then it's up to them to give it a good go. And a good go is genuinely trying, not failing at the first hurdle, right?
Right.
Because everyone's going to fail. Everyone's going to make a mistake. It's not going to go the way you want it to go. Life is like that. Life is not perfect. Life's not great.
It isn't.
But you just have to, as we talked about earlier, continue to take steps forward, back yourself to give it a period of time. And at the worst, you picked up a new skill, a new hobby, something you can talk about. Or know that I don't want to hang around with those people because they're quite boring. Also
something that generations after will remember for a long time, isn't it?
Yeah, it's one where, I never set off to set a legacy, but what I'm becoming increasingly aware of is that in some ways we've set a legacy here.
I also want to understand from everything that we've spoken about, when did you know, what was that stage that you knew 8 months from now, I'm going to cross the Atlantic, I'm going to do this 5,000 kilometer, I'm going to get the team ready. What was that one stage when you knew that this is something that I'm going to do?
I never knew. I just had the courage to keep taking positive steps forward. I was terrified throughout all of it. And, you seek reassurance across your friends, your family, everyone you know. And there's a person here with a large media entity called Richard. And the amount of conversations I had with Richard saying, I've got to give up. I remember nearly a year before having sleepless nights and having a coffee with Richard somewhere and him saying, just keep going, keep going. You never know. And this is the thing about keep trying. It's so easy to say, look, I tried, it was a great idea. I haven't failed, but it's not for me. But it's, the conviction, the courage to keep moving forward. There's not anyone I know that isn't scared. If they say they're not scared, then they're not really in touch with how they're feeling or the possible outcomes are. And for me, we just kept moving forward. We did it in a very thorough way. We did it in a very considered way. We didn't always do it in the best way because, again, we were new to the whole process.
Right.
We had some amazing moments. We had some absolute catastrophes. But at the end of the day, what is generally remembered is, with no experience, putting in a lot of hard work and trying our very best, we rode across the whole of the Atlantic Ocean.
You start at 0 kilometers, you finish at 5,000 kilometers, of course. You spent days, nights, afternoons, the good, the bad, the ugly, everything with a set of people that are on the team with you, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it gets hard, of course, as individuals. It gets very hard. And, the very famous saying that until you don't spend your entire day with somebody, you'd really never know how they are or what kind of an individual you are. You discover so much about yourself. How did that change your perspective about life?
It's interesting because, again, I saw external advice. I regularly consult other people just because I think it's useful to have a range of opinions, insights, expertise. That's what helps build the path forward. Anyone that tries to just do it on their own in terms of having that knowledge, well, you know what you know and you can pick up some stuff off the internet, but what else do you learn? So with that in mind, one of the most interesting things about ocean rowing, and it maintains to be true to this day, is what a catastrophe it is when it comes to picking teams. I was invited to go for an ocean row just before December because a team had fallen apart. If let's say there are 10 people trying to do ocean crossings a year, at least half of them will lose half the members of the team. There will be replacements, there'll be injuries, there'll be massive fallouts. People won't speak together again. And it's exactly the same in our case. Even before we'd got onto the water, we had challenges. And so as a consequence, you then have to, find out what it is that you want to do. How do you want to achieve it? From the perspective of the Atlantic crossing, we had financial challenges. We had a range of different issues. And obviously, we were trying to kind of do a first within the UAE as well. Because from that perspective, I don't think anyone else had brought an ocean rowing boat here before. We were training on local waters. We had to get the permissions. There was so much being done for the first ever time. It presented additional challenges that normally you may not expect. Let's say I want to be a swimming champion or endurance swimming. Well, people have done that here. There's a path, a well-known footpath to develop that and succeed. But for me, everything was new, and that presented challenges of its own. And that included trying to select and work with the team. But that's where the Arctic crossing was a lot better. I had Andy and Orla. They didn't just bring skills; they brought an effort and perseverance that was critical. We had a challenge before setting off when we left in Norway, and my first team would have just given up. They'd just gone off and said, "Fine, it's not going to work." But Andy and Orla, seeing that I was busy on other elements, they just got up and did something. They found solutions to problems. And that's where actually, with experience, you're then able to pick the right people with the right mindset, right attitude to achieve what you need to achieve.
Can you recall one moment, any one particular moment, could be on either one of the expeditions, that challenged you emotionally more than physically, something that really hit hard?
Yeah. On the second row in particular, across the Arctic, we knew the weather wasn't nice. There's no great time to row across the Arctic Ocean. That's why we're the first 3-person team in history to have completed it. So it's picking the best, worst time. And within that, we did all the necessary training. We had all the right gear, everything we needed. It was a professional setup. But what we can't control is the weather. And we kind of had 2 weather advisors and 1 weather router. And all 3 operated independently. They gave us different perspectives on that information that they received and interpreted. And all 3 were very clear that we were going to be in serious trouble if we continued. All 3 were able to pinpoint on the GPS, if we got to that mark, we were toast. If we didn't get to that mark, we were in for a real rough ride. And that perhaps we should look at additional support. In fact, 2 of them, one of them in particular just said, the row is over. They didn't do that for any reason apart from our safety. We talked on the boat about what the best course of action was. Even though I was the captain, it's a group decision. It's a group choice. You've got everyone's lives at risk. And so I called the search and rescue. I made a phone call and I just said, we're aware of the weather that's due to come in the next 24 hours. The advice we received externally is it's going to be more than challenging. It's going to be treacherous. Is the information you have about the weather the same as ours? They said yes. They could see it visually. We couldn't. They talked about these red markers and the clouds and the winds and the waves. And the waves weren't particularly bad. They were going to be about 5 meters, which is still pretty high. But we've been in higher, but it was a combination of the wind, the swells, the temperature of the water, our proximity to, if we fell in, hypothermia, the onset of that. And so a decision was taken that we needed now to consider abandoning the boat. Now, one of the benefits, if there is, of the Arctic was it was covered by helicopters, and we had regularly been in contact with search and rescue. They knew our plans and everything was done. And so I called, search and rescues and just said, we are considering this, just to let you know. And then I called my family and told them we were probably going to have to abandon the boat. And it's a difficult conversation to have because it means that obviously the safety of the team comes first. And the one line we always said is the only decision you had to make was one that kept us safe. That was our foundation. And that remains our foundation no matter what. You can't get too excited about the task at hand. You can't suddenly get too excited or, you have to remember that. So we did. But we also took necessary professional steps. I made a telephone call. The instruction that came back wasn't very sympathetic. It was just like, just get it done. And so I talked to the team about how dangerous it actually was. What was the likely outcome? Is this an imagined fear or is this a real fear? So we decided to progress. So we progressed. I'll never forget, we hit that night, that point, I was told, you just never want to meet because it's just like, it's apocalyptic. And we put what's called a parachute anchor out, which is like a massive upside down parachute, kind of holds a lot of water. It kind of stops us from flipping on waves.
Okay.
Basically. We're not out on deck. We're in our tiny cabins. I was in a tiny cabin with Orla, and there's so little room. We're kind of back to back. Andy was in the other cabin. We're kind of conversing on VHF radio between each other because you can't open doors because water's coming over the top of the boat. We've got videos. We were probably airborne twice off the top of waves. And I remember the best functional thing I could do at that point, apart from search and rescue, knowing where we were, apart from having all the prep stuff, grab bags, anything we might need in order to effect a safe rescue. And also to make sure the rescue didn't put the lives of the rescuers at risk. So it wasn't going to be so treacherous that they were at risk too. But we felt we were okay within what we could see and what we felt we could manage. But I did lie down. I didn't really lie down because you're kind of squashed. But I do remember that particular night wondering if the next time I'm awake, it's as we're trying to abandon the boat because something's happened. And it's difficult, because I've got to get rest. And from a functional perspective, if you are to be rescued, if you are to be effective in trying to save yourself, then you need to have energy. And so you have a rest. And so, both Orla and I had a rest. I don't know if Andy slept much. And I remember just the sheer relief of waking up. And it takes a long time, right? Because you're being thrown, it's like being inside a washing machine.
Yeah, of course.
So you're being thrown around everywhere. But I just remember the sheer relief of waking up. And I don't know if it was a consequence of the fear, but I remember I then had a problem breathing. And actually Orla had it the day before. And she just said, do this. And in the end, we had to wait for a break in the waves just so we could open the hatch a tiny bit just to get some fresh air in. But that was a massive relief. Our tribulations didn't stop then. We continued and more challenges threw themselves at us, but we made it. We made it safely.
That is truly inspiring. The fact that you had to be in the cabins, not knowing what and where you're going to be. Were you in the same position? Were you thrown off course?
So you're never in the same position. The benefit of a parachute anchor is it's impacted by a number of different things, but essentially it can keep you roughly close to where you were. Normally we wouldn't drift more than, let's say, 3 miles or something, 3 nautical miles. But then also you do a pattern with the tides. So actually, if you look at our trackers, we had a number of trackers on the boat. They're all circles.
Right.
Because of the tide moves, you move. And again, you're unaware of all of this. The only thing you really have a sense of is when there's a massive boom. You're like, oh, that was a big wave. Or as the wave comes over, if it drags you this way and the boat really pitches, it's quite a high wave. It was interesting because actually when we were in the Atlantic, we faced bigger waves, but we never once threw out the parachute. And we did at the very beginning because we were scared. But as we developed, we had some much bigger waves and we just rode them out. And I often wonder, is it better to go with the waves? Is it not? It's always a difficult one.
So from a technical standpoint, of course, we want to understand how it all works and functions. So I'm going to, ask you a little more on that before we move on to the other side. Is how many hours on rotation individually of rowing do you need to put in on a daily basis? How many hours of rest do you get? Or is it recommended that you have in the 24 hours?
Yeah, I don't think there's an actual recommendation in terms of rest. Everyone's different. And so as a consequence, what you might need is different for me and for me to somebody else. Added with the rest, you've got to rehydrate. You've got to eat 6,500 calories a day, maybe up to, depending on the weather conditions, up to, 3, 4, 5 liters of water. Because especially in the Atlantic, it's just searing heat. It's so hot. There's no shade. The middle of the boat's completely open. So our patterns in terms of rowing schedules are decided on the basis of how can we effectively balance the use of our energy versus getting rest. And that changes depending on the number of people on your team. I always go as a 3. And consequently, a pattern traditionally of kind of 2 people rowing, 1 person resting during the day proved to us to be something that worked.
Okay.
And in the evening, at night, sometimes it was 2. Most often it was rotating shifts of 1. So that kind of means that during the day, perhaps you only get 1 hour off at a time and you're rowing for 2 hours. And that 1 hour is incredibly complicated. You have to rehydrate. Sometimes you have to make water because we have to desalinate all our own water. We can't carry enough water. So we've got to check the batteries. what are the battery levels like? Can we turn on the water maker? If we don't have enough battery power, what are we not going to turn on? And then, so you've got to make water. The water tastes awful, as you can imagine. You've got to get some rest. You've got to repair your body. You've got to get rid of the salt. There are so many functional things to do that actually getting rest can be quite difficult. Now, you could say on the flip side, why not just make all your food at one time and then eat it later? We've tried that. Sometimes it's just too much to eat. And if each meal is, let's say, at least 1,000 calories, it's a lot to eat. It's a lot to consume. And, one of the things that constantly disappointed me were the pictures on the outside of these packets, because they look great. You know what I mean? Like that's Michelin star stuff. But the powder, when you open it up, it's the same granular stuff.
Yeah.
And it's just not particularly great. That said, at night, because you can't see anything, right? You try and conserve your batteries, so you tend not to have any lights on at all. And so it's touch and feel. So at night, you tend to have kind of your sweets, your chocolate bars, and that's easier to unwrap. Now, they don't have any pictures on, but they certainly taste better.
What about waste management? How do you manage that?
Yeah, so it's a great challenge because we're on the boat for so long, and particularly on the Atlantic, for us, that was 42 days. So any rubbish we produce, we keep on the boat.
Okay.
And so with that in mind, it starts to get rather smelly towards the end. But what do you do, right? So it's all our wrappers, all our packs, everything like that. We keep nothing knowingly goes into the ocean from a product packaging perspective or anything along those lines. Yes, at the end of a meal, we do wash out our packets in the ocean. That tends to attract a lot of fish, but we bring the packets back on. That's just so the packets don't smell so much, and we can wrap them up smaller and put them in the tiny area we have. But yeah, again, all these elements have to be considered before you set off. Where are we going to store the packets? What's that going to look like? How are we going to extract that at the end? Because again, the boat's got really small cubby holes. So how do you put all the rubbish in there? How do you pull it all out? These are functional things that need to be considered. And again, we cook on gas when we can. We have these small kind of Bunsen burner type things that allow some of the water to be heated up, which allows a couple of the meals to be a bit nicer. What do we do with the waste from a gas canister perspective? But all of that's kept and it's brought with us and then disposed of appropriately at the final location.
You mentioned earlier about challenges being operational and financial, right? Just taking that conversation a little ahead, try to understand. Financially, of course, because, you wouldn't have sponsors to come on and say, oh, we're going to support this adventure. Because anyone would be thinking like, out of their mind, they want to do 5,000 kilometers? Like, are they even insane? Who does something like this? But what were some of the earlier financial challenges? How do you put those funds together so that you could make sure that you had this complete?
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. Somebody goes to you and says that I've got no ocean rowing experience, I've got no ocean experience, I don't know anything about this. Nobody's going to be interested, right? But I think, the spirit regionally is one of cooperation. And, one of the partners we had early doors was Under Armour. They came on board and were really very kind and supportive. And we were just very open and honest with where I was at. What we hoped to achieve, because it was much greater. We were trying to highlight the challenges of pollution in the ocean. 90% of the pollution in the ocean is made up of plastic. So there's a huge thing we can do there. There's a great opportunity. We talked about how we were going to go to schools. We were going to talk about the media attention we were going to raise. And, luckily I can look back in hindsight, and they can too, to say, we've probably been to well over 200 schools.
Right.
Universities, corporates, events, everything we hope to achieve, we've achieved. But yeah, it's very difficult initially, but I think you just have to be true and honest. Another entity was Al Masood, again, a UAE-based entity who just, they were very kind, they were very understanding, and I think they wanted something that was going to make, A, the region look good, B, was going to make a real difference to the environment and the planet, but also, more importantly, was going to inspire the next generation. And I think that's where the legacy of all of this is right now. It really has helped to inspire lots of students, lots of adults too, across the region and globally, not just with the protection of the planet and our oceans and plastic pollution in mind, but also daring to dream. You know, when you've got a couple of people just gave it a go, did everything they could, didn't go perfectly, but kind of got a result that we hoped for, and did it in an inclusive way. We've continued with that living legacy. I think it just inspires other people to give things a shot. You know, one of the challenges I faced was I get seasick. You know, it's just like, not this, you know, not another thing. But again, you have to be solution orientated, but you do in life.
Yeah.
You know, nothing's given to you. You have to find your way forward. Yeah. So to answer the question directly from a financial perspective, it was incredibly tough. But you put a plan together. You look to deliver upon that plan. You keep your word. You keep people informed and updated of how things are. If things aren't going your way, you communicate that information in a clear and concise manner. And I think generally people are quite supportive of that. With the Arctic crossing, you know, it started to grow. You know, now we had AD Ports Group, Dubai, a whole range of other entities. So it's got easier as we progressed. And then for us also that helps with our equipment. Right. You know, we now have the best life jackets going in Viking. And the Viking was the brand I wanted from the beginning from a life jacket perspective, very boringly, because they have 2 cylinders instead of one, which means that if one fails, you've got a redundancy, and it just gives you that extra peace of mind. And other elements. So now lots of brands, lots of entities have come and helped us. You know, our clothing now is the best, obviously from a training perspective, we've got Under Armour, but also from a technical perspective, a chap who's heavily involved in the marine industry locally, Mike Fetton, came along and really supported us.
These sponsors, when they do come on board and they said, this is what we want, you said you're very honest with them. You share exactly what your aim is and why you're doing what you're doing. What is the return on investment or the ROI that they're expecting out of being part of such projects?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, because in the past I've been involved in sports sponsorship, and it's a very clinical deal. You know, if you're sponsoring the Olympics, you want brand exposure. Or if you're doing a CSR project, it's because you want something to look good. I think what I've been really happy with is the way that I've been able to work with the sponsors on the project. Because if you look at how they behaved, how they conduct themselves, what they do internally, you know, there's a company called GIG Golf, and they're still running internal programs about this. They're still following the same authentic path we hope to follow. I mentioned Al Masood earlier, they're doing exactly the same thing. I think that's quite rare. I think that involves a very difficult upfront conversation. I think I was quite lucky with what I thought was going to be a difficult upfront conversation in terms of how I wanted them to behave and what they were going to do. They were just quite willing to do that. And that was part of who they were, which in some ways, in my head right now, it's more luck than anything else. I guess I just had so many conversations that I found the right companies with the right people that had the same kind of ethic and integrity that we had. And I've just been incredibly lucky. You know, it's been one where the people who've come on board have been amazing and really supportive and keep driving it forward and done whatever they could.
So it's true when they're saying everything is not about money.
I think so in this circumstance, because I don't get asked to sit there and do commercials to promote a product. I've never been asked to do something for their commercial gain. What they do is say, what do you have in your calendar? What are you doing? Yeah. Do you have a school talk? How can we add value to it? So actually, yes, there were potentially difficult initial conversations, but they were just made a lot easier by their approach. And I think if you look at sports sponsorship generally, you know, whether it's CSR, whether it's whatever term they have for it nowadays, I think that a lot of agencies should have that difficult conversation with their brands to say, you're claiming you want to be authentic. You're claiming you want to be real. Well, show us. Now, obviously, the world's not perfect. And ultimately, it's all about the bottom line.
Correct.
So with finances in mind, I think when you do good, it does come back to you in some capacity. And I think that entities do good, there's just a warm, positive feeling. The culture of a company. So often you go into a company, it's got its culture on the wall. Why does it have it on the wall? Well, because that's not what it practices every day. The culture should be intrinsic. It should be within the people by the way you treat them, the respect you show people, how it operates, how it conducts business. It doesn't need to be on the wall. Yes, it helps and it can show other people, say we're great. But I've just been very lucky. But I do think the sports industry as a whole has a responsibility to, if it's going to use the term CSR, if it's going to use whatever the latest buzzword for that particular element is, it has to do so more authentically. And I think if there is a return on investment people want, they have to be clear about that. Not in terms of saying, I want to achieve more sales. Nobody's saying that people can't benefit financially from something, but just make the overriding objective, if it is going to go into a CSR bucket, something that delivers on that, not just something that gives you media coverage.
It's amazing because sport, life, it's connected so much together. And that's the reason why sport is seen in such a different light in comparison to how anything else is seen in life, right? I often do say this, that you can bring me any book from a library, from the biggest library that houses all the books in the world. You can bring me a book in front of me and tell me this book will teach you everything. I'll still stand down and I will say, no, it will not teach me everything. But sport has the power to teach you everything. That's what I would want to believe.
Sport definitely has the power to teach you an awful lot. I think what's taught me the most is failure. Yeah. I learned so little through my successes. I learn even more through my failures. When you fail, it sits with you. Now, failure is a very individual thing. How you process and consume it, again, is very individual. And I talked earlier about not kind of manifesting and overthinking things.
Correct.
But I do think it's worth observing what went wrong, why it went wrong. Did it go wrong because you wanted it to go wrong? Did it go wrong because you didn't put the effort in? Right. Did it go wrong because of what? And so actually, from a personal perspective, I think everyone should learn every day. I certainly try to, genuinely, for my own benefit. And there's so much to learn. And things are changing so fast. That you have to learn. You have to stay ahead of the game, no matter what it is you're doing. I think the key word is innovation. You have to innovate, not for innovation's sake, but to move the needle forward in a positive manner.
Speak about failure. That's something that sport really teaches you, is also how to deal with failure. Do you believe that in life we remember our failures more than our wins?
100%. 100%. I've been very lucky. I've won a lot. I've won an awful lot. But that's because I'm relentless. But I have failed just as much. I fail consistently. I fail regularly. And each of those failures sit with you in a different way. But I think what you can't let failure do is stop you from being brave. I think one of my, it's going to seem weird having rowed across the Atlantic, one of my kind of personal mottos this year is just to be brave. It's just something that resonates with me for some reason. And I quite often don't take the shot that I need to take. And so as a consequence, certainly for a couple of months, I was very brave. And every time it was cool. And so it's what success looks like to each person. But I also don't think that they should fear failure because everyone fails. It's a pattern in life. It's going to happen. It means nothing. Go on. Because ultimately, without going too deep, we have got that time.
Correct.
And what's really interesting, we don't know what that marker is.
True.
Is it tomorrow? Is it next week? Is this going to be played out in 3 weeks' time? I'm no longer here. It's like, but it's literally one, we just don't know where that marker is.
Correct.
And so as a consequence, you have to go out and you have to give it your all. And, as many people as you can take with you, great. As many people as you can positively influence, great. As many people as you can listen to and hear and help, great. As many people as you can listen to understand and learn, amazing. But everyone just sits and, okay, well, another week goes by, oh, it's a weekend, what should we do this weekend? Oh, no, another week, it's Monday night. Oh, should I go to the gym? I had a big weekend. What do you do? Stop the cycle. Do something incredible for no one else but you, and then you'll be surprised where it takes you.
Be that change maker. Be someone that nobody else has been.
You have to be the person you'd like to see in the world. So who is it?
And you're very right when you say that you can never be a person that can grow alone. So you say you're climbing the ladder. You can do it alone for a while, but then probably you're going to need someone to hold the ladder for you, probably give you a little bit of a helping hand to push you across. And it's very true when, especially the generation now that we're seeing around us. Yes, they're becoming a lot more aware. They're a lot more conscious. They're making some very, very drastic lifestyle choices. They're very aware of where they want to be. At least most of them, I would want to believe that way. But they're also very individualistic in nature. They're not collectivists. So they don't know how to take people along with them as they step forward, because you cannot lead the life individually for a long time, right?
Yeah. In terms of people helping each other or success being a group thing or not, sometimes you can learn. We talked about failure a minute ago. You can learn a lot by how people present themselves to you in failure, and actually then know that you need other people to succeed as well as fail. And the reason why other people in success is so critical, one, just a very basic emotional element to share it with. What a wonderful experience to share with another person. Well, a great moment of joy on your own. What does that do? Nothing. It's egotistical. But a great moment of joy with a lovely group of people, there's nothing quite like it.
True.
And again, sometimes we talk about learning as well. Everyone learns lessons. I've had a particularly tough year. I have learned a lot of lessons. And it's amazing who comes out the woodwork to support you that you might have helped in the past or might not even know yet. And then the question is, what do you then do to help them? So I think you talk about the next generation. I think lots of generations are the same. It's just A, the bravery to reach out and ask for help, get help. And B, secondly, that willingness to want to help others.
Do you believe, because you're talking about helping others and we're talking about how important emotions are, especially because we learn so much in sport. Do you think you meet with people or, for example, you meeting your team, making sure that you're picking the right people, that they're meant to be for that was the time in life when you were supposed to meet with them, they were the right fit for you and it just fell in place?
I think with the row, it's very difficult because, again, let's say I'm about to fly a plane I've just made around the world and I have no flying experience. I think there are very few people in the world that would ever say yes to that. And that was certainly, the challenge I faced when looking for people to row across the ocean. Nobody wanted to do it. And they all thought it was slightly crazy. And they were right to think that. I think that there is something in meeting people at a time you're kind of supposed to meet them. But I also think you have to be ready for that. And it's only looking back that you realize you were supposed to meet them at that point, and it's amazing when you're at such ease that you can take time to reflect. I don't think people do that often enough because we're so caught up with lives, and also because we just want to be so positive. We don't want to look back on challenges. But, certainly I've met some of the most incredible people in the world who, I needed to meet. And just came out of nowhere, met me, and, we progressed together. I also think there's a flip side, and it was particularly when I was part of the running community in the region, the ultra endurance running. We'd meet in the desert at 5 a.m. on a Saturday morning, Sunday morning, and, not everyone will do that. It's also quite far. It can be very cold during the winter. And these are people that want to go places, not just by running, but in terms of they're determined and they structure their lives around trying to achieve in a positive way. I found the running community, I'm not always the most social. I can be, and people laugh, I can be the quietest and isolationist to a certain extent. And that running community just brings it out of you because you're running with people towards a set goal and they don't leave anyone behind and everyone gets there. And so they start to talk to you and you're like, I don't want to chat. And then eventually after 5 minutes, you have to respond, otherwise you're rude. So yeah, I think being around the right people is critical. But again, you have to put yourself in unusual and difficult scenarios to find that. You really do. That bit's up to you. And quite often, the one thing I would say is when I don't want to do something, that's when I either learn the most or grow the most. Because you come out of it just like, wow, like genuinely wow. And it's like, why did I not want to do it?
My next question is a one-word question.
Okay.
And I will give you a little brief on that and then I'll ask you that question. So
Okay.
I'm gonna rephrase that because I need to give you a bit of preview. You're an endurance athlete, right?
Yeah.
Thousands of kilometers in the ocean, I think a few hundred kilometers in the desert as well. Toby, why? That big why.
Well, you said it was a one-word answer. So, not sure be one word if it's joined together. I think it's a relentless determination to succeed. I think it's a relentless determination to achieve something in this brief period of life that we're given. I think it's a determination to see what I can achieve. It's a determination to develop new skills. It's a determination to learn new things. I'm infinitely curious and infinitely interested in new tech, new knowledge, new news. And if I took my last week, 1 minute I'm kind of looking at ultra endurance, the next minute I'm producing global news reports, and then other things. So I live life at 1,000 miles per hour. I always have. And I think there is one thing, and that is when it comes to the end, I want to look back. I don't have to say anything. I just have to think, reflect. If there's one thing, it's going to sound weird that people can do, it's like speak to an older generation. Speak to those that have just retired. Speak to those that are in their 70s. Speak to those that are in their 80s. Ask them a question. What would you do differently? Like now they're going to say what they would have done differently, not what you would have done differently.
Right.
But honestly, by the time you've asked 10 of those people, you'll get the solution to what you need to do in life. And that is to live it.
It's about leaving a lasting impact. That's how I understand it.
Positive impact for your mind and for others as well.
Clearly. You've spoken about tough moments. You've spoken about finances, challenges, the failures and all of that. Now, when we have something that we're doing which is so significant and that's so different from any other normal person that probably wants to do it or not, there are a lot of eyes on you. A lot of people are watching you, right? And you can subconsciously feel, got 10 people watching me right now. How is that going to be? And because you did mention media coverage and all that, how important is it in such extreme sport?
Yeah, good question. So I'm a very private person, which doesn't go with what I've been doing. I hate crowds, hate groups. And I think the one thing I struggled with, and those that know me particularly well will know this, a conversation was had yesterday, it's the media attention side of it, I have a great challenge with. Traditionally, a large part of my job in the past, be it a journalist or working in media production of some sort, has been about generating news for other people. And that bit I find interesting and easy. But when it comes to getting media coverage, again, most journalists are my friends, so that's quite easy, but I don't want to be the subject matter. I think if there was a wish I could have moving forward, is that I could use any momentum I've gathered to share that media coverage with other people and actually have them as the forerunner, as the front runner of all of this, of everything that's being created. My Instagram profile, my personal one is still locked down. You'll never see a piece to camera with me standing there saying, hi, followers, whatever it is. All the videos are of other things, of places, of people, of experiences. So media coverage is incredibly important. It's one side of this project I struggle with personally, not in terms of generating it, but just in terms of the fact I have to do it.
Also maintaining it.
Yeah, maintaining it. The thing is that, so I've got a couple of areas. I've obviously got the plastic pledge that I established. That's easy. It's all about other people. And I've got the plastic pledge that I take into schools. So it's about the schools doing things. So actually, I'm just reflecting what they're doing. I don't have to do anything except for gather the content and share it and make sure that what they're doing is authentic, has integrity, and is true. With my Arctic challenge, again, the Arctic speaks for itself. bit like the ocean, it's responsible for so many of our weather patterns. It has such a role to play in the world. People just don't realize how important the Arctic is. And probably by 2050, it will not be in the way we have it now. And there'll be a massive rush for every single country in the world to claim their piece of the Arctic. So actually, my work in terms of the Arctic is ahead of its time to some extent. And then the work I do with oceans generally around the world and small island developing states, I'm aware that gets a lot of global interest.
Yeah.
You know, it grows significantly every day. And, you know, last week I had conversations with the United Nations about what I could do with small island developing states. So it just shows that the work we're doing is attracting attention at a very high level, not just locally, but globally too. And I guess the media plays their role within that.
How do you see, because you did mention that, talk to people who've just recently retired, then you find a solution. We have a set of generations to come forward. We have got newer and newer generations to come. Do you think there are going to be immense amount of opportunities for, say, emerging athletes, youngsters who want to find their footing in adventure or extreme sporting?
I think there's going to be the same amount there is now. You know, if I wanted to find an issue or a challenge, I can find an issue or a challenge. If I want to find a solution, I will go out my way to find that solution. I think what's going to change is the technology that accompanies such thing. And I think from an external endurance sport perspective, that's going to be the biggest game changer. You know, let's just look at portable batteries. When I was doing ultra endurance running in the desert here in 2012, well, there wouldn't have been a way to recharge stuff.
Right.
It's just not possible.
True.
Solar panels that are light enough, how much energy they produce, everything else, that's a game changer. So what does that allow from an endurance perspective? It allows for you to be more resilient and maintain certain things for a longer period of time. So if I have more battery power, I'm able perhaps to keep my GPS full powered. You know, even if you look at the watches, I've got this Garmin watch, it's got a solar panel on it.
Right.
And so that's charging when I'm not doing anything.
Right.
You know, I actually, my Garmin tracked the whole journey across the Atlantic. You know, that's 42 days just in this ultra endurance mode. So actually, I think as we look ahead, technology is going to change the game in terms of what people can do and how they do it. It's just going to be more accessible in terms of communication. You know, again, I used to go out with this old watch with 2 AA batteries.
Yeah.
And that would track my distance and where I was and allow me, if I got lost, to find my way home. And now that's a thing of the past. So actually, I think moving forward, there's going to be huge advancements in sports. I think there's going to be huge advancements in how we're able to consume sports. You know, so let's say there's an endurance race. I did the marathon to Saab. So it's like you run across the Sahara Desert for 7 days, a marathon each day. And on one day, there's like this double marathon. I think ours was maybe 90 kilometers in one day. And you're carrying a rucksack with all your stuff.
Right.
So like if I went to a sponsor and said, oh, can you sponsor this? They'll say, well, how many people, what media coverage? Great. How do we interact? Well, actually moving forward using technology, wearable tech, you know, probably my shirt's tracking my sweat content. My shirt's telling me how much I'm dehydrating.
Correct.
My shirt is telling me what my heart rate is.
Right.
Maybe that's going back to the organizers. Maybe there's a race. I'm never in the front of these things.
Yeah.
But let's briefly imagine for my own and I'm in the top 4. What's the heart rate of them? You know, what's somebody got left? No, we know this person's dehydrated. So actually, I think what will make certain ultra endurance sports more accessibility is wearable tech that puts it into a consumable area for spectators and those who want to engage with it, which again will bring finance and interest to the sport.
From your perspective, do you think the role sports education institutions are going to play in preparing these future athletes for these challenges are going to be significant in the time to come?
I think they're going to be more significant than ever because basically what we've seen is in some ways a professionalization of sport more generally. You know, sports sponsorship was, we've got some marketing budget left. Can we put our logo on the front of something? Right. You know, sports sponsorship is not just about ROI. We've talked about CSR and increasingly with transparency and how we can monitor that transparency. There's going to need to be a professionalization of that. I think sports institutes and centers of excellence such as this are going to be critically important because there's that bridging between the actual sport itself. Right. So what's the discipline?
Correct.
How's that approached?
Right.
What age am I doing that? What's my barriers to entry? Because again, unless I started swimming from a very young age and was on some elite player pathway,
Correct.
I'm out the swimming thing.
Yeah.
But nowadays we're finding people come later to certain sports.
True.
And I think, as I said, they need that access. They need somebody that can give them those courses, the education that's required to be able to participate.
Correct.
So I think actually what's going to be interesting, particularly with an entity such as yourselves, is the age range that you're going to be able to attract to provide outcomes that are necessary.
Yeah. Sports professionals, they need to look at a lot of the different post my playing days. That's a conversation that I really like. And I've also asked some of the other guests, how does that change for you as an athlete in terms of your planning? Because you got to plan, right? You got to know your barriers of entry. You need to know how far you can go versus how far you can't go. What's going to be that decision for athletes to make, which is going to be your post-performance time?
For me or generally?
Generally.
Okay, so performance for sports medicine, the advancements there, we're going to see older athletes in what were traditionally younger sports.
Right.
So that's number one. So, and then I think along with this professionalization, there's a real understanding that professional sports life is relatively short.
Mm-hmm.
So before you even go into it, what's my outcome? I was reading about a rugby player yesterday who he's just started. He's just had his first international cap. He already knows what he's going to do when he retires.
Okay.
And I think that's crucially important, not just from a financial matter, but if you speak to a lot of those that used to play professional sports, and I've been very fortunate, I've got to interview lots on the radio and for television. One of their biggest things is they've got no routine. They were told to be somewhere on a Monday morning. They were told what time they were training, what they had to eat. They knew who their mates were, what was going to happen afterwards. That all falls apart when you fall out of the professional environment.
Right.
So I think from an education perspective, you've got the financial parts, which are crucial, and the professionalization of that. But I think more importantly, the mental elements, which are often overlooked, but equally as important.
I'm so inspired, even on a personal sense, because sometimes it becomes hard to connect with someone you've met only for the first time, you've had a brief conversation with. Of course, I've done some research behind your work and the work that you do with the UN, your time in the ocean, etc. But just the interaction, your learnings from everything that you've observed, every second that you've spent out in the water, even the time, in the desert has been, has just showed that life is so much beyond what we think of it to be, right? And keeping that in mind, if there was one piece of advice that you would want to give to someone who wants to pursue a career in extreme sports professionally, what would that be?
I think I'd widen that. And it's, if anyone wants to pursue anything in life, you have to do it and you have to take that step. It's literally, don't overthink it. Don't overcomplicate it. Take one step. In anything, that's the starting point. And that's all you have to do. You don't have to have the answers, but you do have to start traveling in that direction.
And before we let you go, of course, is there anything that you think from a sports education perspective that you'd want to tell our young generation?
Again, I think sports is the unknown frontier. Why? Because everyone talks about AI. Everyone talks about finance. Everyone talks about sustainability. Everyone talks about all these different elements. Well, sports fits across all of that. And so actually by pursuing something in sports, you're able to channel it into AI. You're able to channel it into sustainability, finance, whatever you happen to want. So with that in mind, it's a wonderfully positive industry topic to be involved with. It doesn't sit still. It continues to innovate. And so therefore, get onto that journey and you'll be caught on that wave moving forward.
It's going to be a promising career.
Without question. But it's on you to move forward.
Toby, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's been an honor to be in your presence. I'm going back with, like you said, you learn every day. I'm going back with lots and lots of lessons. I'm going back, I think, a little bit of a changed individual myself. After
I look forward to following your journey.
That's a conversation as well.
Okay.
And I'd be happy to share it with you. But thank you so much for sharing everything you know and everything that you know beyond.
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity. And thank you for your openness and your kindness.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Toby. Inspiring and inspiring more. That's what we promise you at the Game Plan podcast, powered by the Middlesex University Dubai and the London Sport Institute. Don't forget to subscribe to our brand new channel, the Game Plan DXB, on YouTube. We're going to bring you more inspiring stories, something that will touch your heart, something that will change who you are as an individual. That's what we aim to do. Don't go anywhere. Stay tuned with us.